Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making Halloween cake pops. The basic recipe for the cake pops is 100 grams of caster sugar, 100 grams of self-raising flour, 100 grams of unsalted butter and 2 eggs. To start, combine the butter and the sugar together. Next, add your eggs, one at a time, making sure they're mixed in. Sieve in your flour. And fold it in. I'm going to be using cake pop moulds. I'll show you what to do if you don't have a mould later on. Fill up one half of your mould. Put on the top half of the mould and put them in the oven. But if you don't have a mould, simply make any cake of any size. Pop these in the oven. At 180 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. You can see if they're done by poking a toothpick into the centre. If there's cake mix on the toothpick, then they need a little bit more time in the oven. If it's clean, then they're ready. I would recommend letting your cakes cool before trying to take off the mould. I broke one in half, but we can fix that later. Using a clean pair of scissors, I trim off the excess. If you didn't have a mould and you just made a cake, take your cake and crumble it up into pieces. You can keep the pieces quite big. Then make some simple buttercream, using butter and icing sugar of equal measures. Add your buttercream to the cake crumbs and mush it all together. It should be sticky enough that you can stick them together and roll into balls. I'm going to use white chocolate to add the sticks. Melt a few pieces of white chocolate in the microwave. To fix my broken pop, just use the white chocolate as a glue and stick the two sides back together. To add the sticks, cover one end completely in chocolate and push this into the cake. I found a piece of styrofoam from my recycling, and this was great to hold the cake pops as they dried. While these set, I drew up my designs on my iPad. Eyeballs, mummy, pumpkin and a zombie. I'm going to try and save myself some time when I do the base layer, starting with the white for the eyeball. I can then add a little bit of food colouring to make the beige for the mummy, and then add more food colouring for the pumpkin. The zombie I can do separately. So let's start with the eyeball. A small, thin container will be best for this. One that's big enough that you can fit your cake pop through, but tall enough so it's easy to dip into. So melt some more white chocolate into this container. Dip your pop into the chocolate. You can tap off any excess to make sure it's a nice, even, thin coat. I made 4 of each design, so 4 pops went into this white chocolate. For the mummy, I simply added a bit of my ivory food colouring. I recommend this Wilson food colouring, so you only need a little bit to get a good colour. I got it to the beige colour I wanted, and then dipped again. For the mummy, I wanted the base to be a little bit messy, so I didn't worry about making it a smooth base. Next, I can make my pumpkin, adding in the red and yellow to make the orange I needed. For the zombie, I made a new batch of chocolate and added blue and green to make a turquoise colour. With the bases all done, let's get on to adding the detail. I use simple icing to do the details. Icing sugar and water. I recommend starting with your icing sugar and adding drops of water until you get the consistency you need. For the mummy, I made the same beige colour and added this to a small icing bag. I wrapped the icing around the mummy to make it look like bandages. Another way to add details is to actually use vodka. Using a tiny amount, add your food colouring to the vodka to make the colours you want. I was going for a very dark brown. I then simply paint it on. It'll take quite a lot of coats to get a dark colour, but it dries quickly and you can get some really good results from it. I also brushed some of this on over the bandages to make them look more worn and old. Once all that was dry, I added a bright green eye to the mummies. You can use a toothpick to move around the icing to get it where you need it. Next up, the pumpkins. Using icing coloured orange, I piped on lines all the way around the pumpkin. I roughly marked out the pumpkin face and used a toothpick to make the lines cleaner and get them into the shapes I wanted. For the eyeballs, I used a deep purple to make the iris. Use the coloured vodka to add in the pupil. And then a red icing to add the veins. Finally, the zombies. I used a cookie cutter and gently removed a small portion of the cake pop. This is to make the exposed brain area of the zombie. Using a deep pink and red, I filled in the now exposed area of cake. Using the vodka and food colouring again, I painted on their mouth. Again, this needed a lot of layers to make it stand out. I added on some bright white, empty eyes. And a couple of teeth. I used a small amount of beige from the mummies to make sure the teeth weren't too pearly white. I mixed up some very thick icing, using hardly any water. I then let the icing drip from a height to make the swirly brains. Added in a couple of gunk spots too. And there you go. Simple Halloween cake pops.